The shot that cracked through the still Wyoming air in the summer of 1878 wasn't meant to kill, but to silence Fiona Porter as she begged her father not to sell off the last of their chickens. The bullet whistled past her ear and embedded itself in the weathered barn door behind her, sending splinters flying across the dirt yard. At 19, Fiona had grown accustomed to her father's violent outbursts, but this time was different. This time, he'd actually pulled the trigger. "You're nothing but a burden to feed," Elijah Porter spat, the revolver still smoking in his hand. His once handsome face was now permanently twisted with bitterness since Fiona's mother had died 5 years earlier. "Should have married you off 2 years ago when that traveling salesman offered $3 for you." Fiona stood her ground, though her knees threatened to buckle. "Those chickens are our last chance to make it through winter, Pa? And what do you know about making it through winter?" he snarled, advancing toward her. The smell of cheap whiskey preceded him like a noxious cloud. A girl who eats more than she's worth. Fiona knew better than to argue further. She'd learned that silence was sometimes the only defense against his rage. But as she backed away, her eyes fell on her mother's silver locket hanging from his pocket, the one item he'd promised Fiona would always be hers to keep. "You're taking that to town too?" she asked, unable to mask the hurt in her voice. Her father's hand closed around the locket. "Silver fetches a good price. Better than you ever will." That night, as her father's snores rattled through their small cabin, Fiona made a decision. With trembling hands, she packed her mother's old carpet bag with her second dress, a hairbrush, and the worn Bible that had been her only source of comfort in recent years. She crept to the kitchen and wrapped 2 biscuits and an apple in a cloth, tucking them beside her meager belongings. The moon was high when she slipped out the back door, past the empty chicken coop, and toward the road that led to the town of Whiteridge. She had no plan beyond putting distance between herself and her father's violence. Perhaps Mrs. Thornton at the general store would let her sleep in the storeroom in exchange for work. Or maybe the new schoolteacher needed help with the younger children. By dawn, Fiona's feet were blistered inside her 2 small boots, but Whiteridge was finally visible in the distance. The sight gave her a surge of courage. Freedom, even uncertain freedom, was worth the pain. She was so focused on the town ahead that she didn't notice the rider approaching until his horse's snort startled her. Fiona jumped back, nearly tumbling into the ditch beside the road. "Whoa there," a deep voice called as the rider pulled his mount to a stop. "Didn't mean to frighten you, miss." Fiona looked up to see a man astride a chestnut gelding. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps in his mid-20s, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of summer sage. His clothes were dust-covered but of good quality, and the horse beneath him was well kept. "You're a long way from anywhere," he observed, tipping his hat. "Especially for a lady traveling alone." Fiona clutched her carpet bag tighter. "I'm headed to Whiteridge. That makes 2 of us." He studied her for a moment, noting her disheveled appearance and the wariness in her eyes. "Name's Yates Vaughn. I run cattle about 20 miles west of here." "Fiona Porter," she replied automatically, then regretted giving her real name. If her father came looking, it would be too easy to track her. Yates nodded toward her feet, where a spot of blood had soaked through her left boot. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," she insisted, shifting her weight to hide the evidence. His expression softened. "Miss Porter, I don't make a habit of leaving injured women on deserted roads. May I offer you a ride to town?" Fiona hesitated. Her father had warned her about the dangers of strange men, but the irony wasn't lost on her that the most dangerous man she knew was the one she'd just fled. This cowboy's eyes held no malice, and her feet screamed for relief. "I would appreciate that," she finally said. With surprising gentleness, Yates dismounted and helped her onto his horse before swinging up behind her. The closeness made Fiona stiffen, but as they rode, the steady rhythm of the horse's gait and Yates's respectful silence gradually eased her tension. "What brings you to Whiteridge?" he asked after they'd traveled in silence for several minutes. Fiona considered fabricating a story about visiting relatives, but something about Yates's straightforward manner made her reluctant to lie. "I'm looking for work," she said simply. "Running from something too, I'd wager," he added quietly. She didn't confirm or deny it, but her silence was answer enough. "Well," he continued, "Whiteridge has been growing since the railroad spur came through last year. Might be opportunities for a young woman willing to work hard. When they reached the outskirts of town, Fiona expected Yates to let her down at the first opportunity, his good deed done. Instead, he guided his horse directly to Dr. Miller's small office. "Your foot needs tending," he explained when she protested. "Dr. Miller's wife, Sarah, is a kind woman. She'll help you get settled." Before Fiona could argue further, the door to the doctor's house opened, and a plump, pleasant-faced woman emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. "Yates Vaughn, as I live and breathe. We weren't expecting you until next week for the cattle sale." "Change of plans, Mrs. Miller," he replied, dismounting and reaching up to help Fiona down. "Found this young lady on the road to town. She's hurt her foot and is looking for work." Sarah Miller's keen eyes took in Fiona's situation with one sweeping glance: the carpetbag, the worn dress, the frightened yet determined set of her jaw. Without a word, she stepped forward and took Fiona's arm. "Well, you've come to the right place, dear. Let's get you inside and have a look at that foot." Fiona turned to thank Yates, but he was already mounting his horse again. "I've got business at the stockyards," he explained, "but I'll check on you later, if that's all right." Surprised by his continued concern, Fiona could only nod as Mrs. Miller ushered her inside. The doctor's wife proved to be as efficient as she was kind. She cleaned and bandaged Fiona's blistered feet, provided a simple but filling meal of bread and stew, and asked few questions about Fiona's circumstances. "There's a room above the millinery shop that's vacant," Sarah told her as Fiona finished eating. "Miss Abernathy needs an assistant, and the room comes with the position. It's not much, but it's clean and safe." "I don't know anything about making hats," Fiona admitted. Sarah smiled. "Eliza Abernathy is an excellent teacher, and she's been looking for someone with nimble fingers and a willingness to learn." She patted Fiona's hand. "Rest here for now. I'll speak to Eliza this afternoon." True to his word, Yates returned later that day. By then, Sarah had already arranged for Fiona to meet with Miss Abernathy the following morning. Fiona was sitting on the miller's back porch, her bandaged feet propped on a stool, when he arrived. "You look better," he observed, settling into the chair beside her. "Less like you're about to bolt at the first loud noise." Despite herself, Fiona smiled. "Mrs. Miller has been very kind. She mentioned you might have work at the millinery." Fiona nodded. "And a room, if Miss Abernathy approves of me." Yates leaned back in his chair, studying her. "It's a good start. Eliza Abernathy is well respected in town. Being associated with her will give you standing." "Why are you helping me?" Fiona asked suddenly. "You don't know anything about me." He was quiet for a moment, his eyes drifting to the distant mountains. "Let's just say I recognize the look of someone who's been dealt a hard hand. 8 years ago, I was sleeping in barns and taking whatever work I could find. And now you own a cattle ranch." "Part of one," he corrected. "My partner and I built it up from almost nothing. Started with 12 scraggly cows and a dream." His smile was genuine. Sometimes all a person needs is a chance. The following morning, Fiona limped to Abernathy's millinery, her heart pounding with anxiety. The shop was small but elegant, with elaborate hats displayed in the front window and spools of ribbon lining the walls in a rainbow of colors. Eliza Abernathy was a tall, angular woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun. Her inspection of Fiona was thorough but not unkind. "Mrs. Miller speaks highly of you," she said after introducing herself. "She says you're eager to learn and not afraid of hard work." "Yes, madam," Fiona replied, trying to stand straighter despite her painful feet. "The position pays $3 a week, plus the room upstairs. Sunday afternoons are yours, but I expect you here all other days from 7 until 6, and later when we have special orders." It was more money than Fiona had ever had to call her own. "That's very generous." Eliza's thin lips curved in what might have been a smile. "We'll see if you still think so after a day of pricking your fingers with needles. Come, I'll show you your quarters." The room above the shop was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a chest of drawers. The window overlooked the main street of Whiteridge, and sunlight streamed across the faded quilt on the bed. "It's perfect," Fiona breathed, unable to believe her good fortune. "The previous girl left rather abruptly to get married," Eliza explained. "I've had no time to find a replacement until Sarah mentioned you." She fixed Fiona with a penetrating stare. "I don't know what circumstances brought you to Whiteridge, Miss Porter, and I won't pry. But I run a respectable establishment. I expect you to conduct yourself accordingly. Yes, madam. I will. Good. You'll start tomorrow. Your feet need another day of rest. That evening, as Fiona was settling into her new room, a knock came at the shop's back door. When she made her way downstairs, she found Yates waiting with a small bundle in his hands. Miss Abernathy said you were staying here now, he explained. I brought you something. He handed her the package, wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a pair of women's boots, well-made and sturdy, but smaller than the ones she'd worn on her journey to town. I noticed yours were too large, Yates said when she looked up in surprise. Probably your father's old ones. These should fit better. Fiona ran her fingers over the soft leather. I can't accept these. They must have cost. Consider it an investment in your future, he interrupted. Can't have Whiteridge's newest milliner hobbling around on blistered feet. Fiona felt tears threatening. No one had given her a gift since her mother died. Thank you, she whispered. Try them on, he urged. The boots fit perfectly. Fiona took a few experimental steps, marveling at the difference. I'm in town for another 3 days before I head back to the ranch, Yates told her. Thought maybe I could show you around Whiteridge a bit, once your feet are feeling better. Fiona hesitated. Accepting the boots was already more charity than she was comfortable with. You've done enough for me already. It's not charity I'm offering, Miss Porter. His voice was gentle but firm. It's friendship. Everyone needs a friend in a new place. Looking into his earnest face, Fiona found herself nodding. I'd like that. The next few days passed in a blur as Fiona began learning the millinery trade. Eliza Abernathy proved to be a demanding but fair teacher, and Fiona discovered she had a natural talent for the delicate work of shaping and trimming hats. Her nimble fingers quickly mastered the basics of sewing silk flowers and attaching feathers, just so. True to his word, Yates called for her each evening after the shop closed. He showed her the safest routes through town, introduced her to shopkeepers he trusted, and helped her open an account at the small bank where she could deposit her wages. On his last evening in Whiteridge, they sat on a bench outside the hotel, eating ice cream from the confectionery. I'll be back in town in about 3 weeks, Yates told her. We're driving a herd to the railroad for shipping east. Fiona was surprised by the pang of disappointment she felt. In just a few days, Yates had become her anchor in this new life. Your ranch sounds wonderful, she said, trying to hide her feelings. You must be proud of what you've built. It's still a work in progress. He turned to face her, his expression serious. Fiona, before I go, I need to ask you something. Are you safe here? Is there anyone I should be concerned about coming after you? The question caught her off guard. My father, she admitted after a moment. But I doubt he'll bother looking for me. As he often reminded me, I was just another mouth to feed. Anger flashed in Yates's eyes. No parent should ever make their child feel like a burden. It wasn't always that way, Fiona said softly. After my mother died, something in him just broke. The drinking got worse, and so did his temper. Is that why you left? His temper? Fiona stared at her half-eaten ice cream. He fired a shot past my head when I asked him not to sell our last chickens. Said I was worth less than they were. She gave a bitter laugh. He was probably right. Yates's hand covered hers, warm and steady. Don't ever say that again, he said fiercely. Your father is a fool who couldn't see the treasure right in front of him. The conviction in his voice made her look up, and the intensity in his gaze stole her breath. For a moment, neither spoke, connected by something deeper than the brief time they'd known each other. Finally, Yates cleared his throat. If he ever comes looking for you, you send word to me immediately. The ranch is called Sage Creek. Anyone in town can get a message to me. He won't come, Fiona insisted, though the reassurance was as much for herself as for Yates. But she was wrong. 2 weeks after Yates left town, Fiona was arranging a display in the front window of the millinery when she saw him, her father, stumbling out of the saloon across the street. Her heart seized with terror as he paused, squinting in the bright sunlight, his gaze roaming the storefronts. Fiona ducked behind a mannequin, praying he hadn't seen her. When she dared to peek again, he was gone, but the damage was done. Her sanctuary no longer felt secure. That evening, she confided in Eliza, who listened with uncharacteristic gentleness. You're not the first girl to run from a bad situation, the older woman said when Fiona finished her story. And you won't be the last. But you have friends here now, and we protect our own. The next morning, Eliza had the local carpenter install a sturdy lock on the back door of the shop and gave Fiona a small Derringer pistol to keep in her room. I pray you never need to use it, Eliza told her. But a woman alone should know how to protect herself. For a week, Fiona jumped at every loud noise and scanned the streets anxiously whenever she ventured outside. But there was no further sign of her father, and gradually, she began to relax. Perhaps he'd only been passing through, or maybe he'd been too drunk to remember why he'd come to Whiteridge in the first place. Then one night, the sound of breaking glass jolted her from sleep. Someone was trying to get into the shop. Fiona grabbed the Derringer and crept to the top of the stairs. Below, she could hear her father's slurred curses as he fumbled through the dark shop. "Know you're here, girl," he called, his voice thick with alcohol. "Saw you in the window. Think you can run from your own pa?" Fear paralyzed her for a moment, but then anger surged through her veins. This man had stolen her childhood, her security, even her mother's locket. She would not let him steal her new beginning. "Get out, pa," she called, her voice steadier than she felt. "I've got a gun, and I'll use it if I have to." His laugh was ugly. "Always were a liar. You ain't got the spine to pull a trigger." The stairs creaked as he began to climb, and Fiona backed toward her room, the Derringer shaking in her hand. Just as he reached the top step, there was a tremendous crash from below, followed by shouting. "Porter, step away from those stairs." Fiona nearly collapsed with relief at the sound of Sheriff Taylor's authoritative voice. Her father froze, then whirled around, losing his balance and tumbling halfway down the staircase. By the time Fiona reached the shop floor, her father was in handcuffs, bleeding from a cut on his forehead where he'd hit the newel post during his fall. "You all right, Miss Porter?" the sheriff asked, his grip firm on Elijah Porter's arm. "Yes," she managed, though her whole body was trembling. "Miss Abernathy sent word your pa might be causing trouble. We've been keeping an eye on the place." He gave her father a disgusted look. "Breaking and entering's a serious offense, Porter. You'll be spending some time in my jail." As they led him away, her father twisted to look back at her, his face contorted with hate. "Ungrateful whelp. After all I sacrificed to raise you." Fiona stood her ground. "The only thing you sacrificed was your humanity, pa? And that was your choice, not mine." The words felt like breaking chains. For the first time, Fiona saw her father clearly not as the terrifying figure who had dominated her life, but as a broken, pitiful man whose power over her existed only if she allowed it. The following day, news arrived that a cattle drive was approaching town. Fiona's heart lightened at the thought of seeing Yates again, though she dreaded telling him about her father's appearance. Would he think less of her for bringing trouble to Whiteridge? The town came alive as the cattle were herded into the stockyards, and cowboys filled the saloons and shops. Fiona was busy all day as the wives of wealthy ranchers came to order new hats for the upcoming harvest dance. It was nearly closing time when the bell above the shop door jingled, and Yates walked in, his hat in his hands. The sight of him tanned from weeks in the sun, his smile warm and genuine, made Fiona's heart skip. "Miss Porter," he greeted her formally, aware of Eliza's watchful presence nearby. "I hope you've been well." "Very well, thank you, Mr. Vaughn," she replied, matching his tone though her eyes conveyed much more. Eliza cleared her throat. "Miss Porter, why don't you take an early supper break? You've been on your feet all day." Grateful for her employer's understanding, Fiona removed her work apron and retrieved her shawl. Outside, as soon as they were beyond the shop windows, Yates took her hand. "I've thought about you every day," he said without preamble. "The drive was successful, but all I wanted was to get back to Whiteridge." Fiona blushed at his directness. "I've missed you too," she admitted. They walked to a small cafe where Yates ordered supper for them both. As they ate, Fiona told him about her father's intrusion and the sheriff's intervention. "I should have been here," Yates said, his jaw tight with anger. "Where is he now?" "Still in jail. Sheriff Taylor says he'll go before the judge next week." She hesitated. "I don't want to press charges, Yates. I just want him out of my life. And if he comes back, then I'll deal with it," she said firmly. "I'm not afraid of him anymore." Yates studied her face, noting the new confidence in her bearing. "You've changed," he observed. "There's a strength in you now that was only hinted at before." I'm learning who I am without fear defining me, she said simply. After supper, they walked to the edge of town, where the land opened up to rolling plains and the distant mountains were bathed in the golden light of sunset. I have something to show you, Yates said, leading her to where his horse was tethered. From his saddlebag, he withdrew a small velvet pouch. I found this in a pawnshop in Cheyenne. Fiona gasped as he poured the contents into her palm, her mother's silver locket, the one her father had taken to sell. How did you know? She whispered, tears filling her eyes. You mentioned it that first day at the miller's. Said it was the one thing of your mother's you wished you'd brought with you. He shrugged, suddenly shy. I've been checking pawnshops in every town between here and Cheyenne, hoping he might have sold it along the way. Fiona's fingers trembled as she opened the locket to reveal the tiny portrait of her mother inside. I can't believe you found it. The shopkeeper remembered your father. Said he was more interested in the whiskey he could buy than the fair price for the silver. Yates gently took the locket from her hands and fastened it around her neck. It belongs with you. Fiona touched the cool metal against her skin, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. Why would you go to such trouble for me? Yates took her hands in his. Because from the moment I saw you on that road, something in me recognized something in you. Like my soul had been waiting for yours. Yates, she breathed, not knowing how to respond to such a declaration. I know it sounds foolish, he continued. We barely know each other. But these past weeks, all I could think about was getting back to Whiteridge to you. When I heard what happened with your father. He shook his head. I realized life's too short to waste time pretending I don't feel what I feel. And what do you feel? Fiona asked, her heart pounding. That you're not a burden to be endured, Fiona. You're a blessing to be cherished. His voice dropped to a whisper. Your father said you were a burden to feed, but the truth is, you feed my soul. The words broke something open inside her, a place that had been locked away for so long she'd forgotten it existed. Tears spilled down her cheeks as Yates pulled her gently into his arms. I don't expect you to feel the same, he murmured against her hair. But I needed you to know. Fiona leaned back to look into his face. How could I not feel the same? You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. In the fading light, with the vast Wyoming sky above them, Yates lowered his head and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, full of promise and possibility, and Fiona felt as though she'd finally found her way home. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Fiona's life. Her father, faced with jail time, agreed to leave Whiteridge and never return in exchange for dropped charges. Sheriff Taylor escorted him to the eastbound train with a stern warning that any return would result in immediate arrest. Yates extended his stay in town, helping to complete the cattle sale and making arrangements for the ranch while he was absent. Each evening, he and Fiona walked together, talking of their dreams and building a future neither had dared imagine before. Eliza Abernathy watched their courtship with wry amusement. That young man's eyes follow you like a compass points north, she told Fiona one afternoon as they worked on trimming a wedding bonnet. I've seen that look before. It doesn't fade. Fiona blushed. He wants me to visit his ranch before winter sets in, to see if I could imagine living there someday. And can you? Eliza asked, her usual briskness softened by genuine interest. I think I could imagine living anywhere, as long as it's with him, Fiona admitted. The older woman nodded approvingly. Then you've found something precious, my dear. Not everyone does. On a crisp October day, Yates took Fiona to Sage Creek Ranch. The main house was modest but solid, with a wide porch facing the mountains and comfortable rooms inside. Yates showed her the improvements he planned: a larger kitchen, a proper garden, perhaps even a small orchard if they could make it thrive in the Wyoming climate. It's beautiful, Fiona told him as they stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. I can see why you love it here. It's been lonely, though, he admitted. Building something worthwhile means little if there's no one to share it with. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Fiona Porter, I know we haven't known each other long by most standards, but my heart has known yours forever, it seems. He dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. Will you marry me? Will you make this house a home, and this life a shared journey? Fiona's eyes filled with tears of joy. Yes, she whispered. Yes, with all my heart. They were married in Whiteridge that December, in a small ceremony at the town's church. Eliza Abernathy created a wedding bonnet for Fiona that was the envy of every woman in the county, and Sarah Miller hosted the reception at her home. As Yates and Fiona danced their first dance as husband and wife, he pulled her close and whispered, "You know, that first day when I found you on the road, I almost took a different route to town." Fiona looked up at him, her eyes shining. "But you didn't." "No," he agreed, smiling down at her. "And now I know why. Some paths are meant to cross, no matter what. And some burdens," she said softly, "turn out to be the greatest blessings of all." The following spring, as wildflowers bloomed across the prairie surrounding Sage Creek Ranch, Fiona stood on the porch of their home, her hand resting on the slight swell of her stomach where their first child was growing. In the distance, Yates rode in from checking the new calves, his figure silhouetted against the vast Wyoming sky. Watching him approach, Fiona touched the silver locket at her throat, a symbol of all she had lost and all she had found. Her father's cruel words no longer had power over her. She knew now what she was truly worth, not as a mouth to feed or hands to work, but as a woman capable of giving and receiving love, of building a life filled with purpose and joy. As Yates dismounted and climbed the porch steps, his face lighting up at the sight of her, Fiona thought of how far she had come from that desperate girl fleeing down a dusty road. The journey had led her not just to safety, but to belonging. "Welcome home," she said, stepping into his embrace. "The best part of leaving," Yates replied, kissing her tenderly, "is always coming back to you." And in that moment, surrounded by the beauty of the land they now shared, Fiona knew that she had found not just a home for her body, but a sanctuary for her soul, a place where she was never a burden, but always a blessing.